Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to NTA for inviting me to this event. It's always great to be in a room where, it sounds like you already kind of get that the food industry might have something to do with what we've all been talking about, right? And so what I want to do for you is just kind of give you a bit of an overview about what motivated me to take this angle on the issue. And then I'm also going to make sure to leave enough time for some questions. So, because I want to, also have a dialogue and hear more about what you'd like to focus on. Because the way I look at how my talk fits in is, all of you are really having a huge challenge on your hands, right, when it comes to telling clients who are suffering from all kinds of problems related to the standard American diet. You're trying to tell them how to fix that, right? So, as I always tell nutrition professionals, you can talk to them until you're blue in the face about how to eat right, and then, of course, what happens? They go right out the door, and on the next corner is the Dunkin' Donuts or the McDonald's or the Pizza Hut. And, what you're up against as health professionals is just an incredible challenge. So I just want to, acknowledge that, and then hopefully by the end of my talk, also help inspire you to go beyond just the individual counseling and education that you do and really get more political. Because at the end of the day, we're really not going to fix these problems with, frankly, better education or yet another book about sugar addiction, right? We're really going to fix these problems by really organizing to fix our health-related chronic diseases from diet by turning our attention to the food industry. So with that, I had my sort of aha moment. I'd been writing about the food industry for a number of years when I attended this conference back in 2004. And this was an event called the Summit on Obesity, and it was hosted by Time Magazine and ABC News, and they wanted to forge solutions to the obesity epidemic, right? And so giving the keynote address was this man, our former head of Health and Human Services, Tommy Thompson, who came from the cheese state of Wisconsin, and he really didn't know anything about public health, but he was there giving his rah-rah speech about how we had to spread the gospel of personal responsibility, and he was naming a number of corporations that he was meeting with, the CEOs of these major corporations, who were also on board and really showing their corporate responsibility when it comes to finding solutions to the obesity epidemic. And one of the companies he mentioned along these lines was Coca-Cola. So then a funny thing happened beyond that. The really funny thing happened when he took questions from the audience, and this was an audience full of, savvy policymakers, health professionals, and so forth. And a politician by the name of Charles Brown from the state of Indiana got up and asked Secretary Thompson if Coca-Cola was such a responsible company, then why had they sent 5 lobbyists to his state capital to kill his bill that would have required only half of all soft drinks sold through school vending machines to be healthy? Okay, well, Tommy Thompson didn't have such a great answer for that, and he just kind of stumbled and said, well, I don't know anything about it, but if it happens again, you call me. Right. So I thought, gee, maybe this politician who, was trying to do the right thing isn't the only one finding himself on the receiving end of some heavy-duty lobbying by the food industry. And that was sort of my inspiration for taking a closer look at what really is essentially a hypocrisy that's going on right now, with how the food industry is, on one hand, spinning itself as being part of the solution, while on the other hand, just engaging in business as usual. So I want to just kind of walk you through the way I look at the big picture, my little schematic here. And when I think about the food industry, it's kind of a combination of players, but mostly the big sort of branded products that you would know, like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, and then of course the fast food industry, McDonald's, et cetera. They're kind of in the middle of this firestorm now, right? And the thing to keep in mind is they are constantly under these two pressures that are represented here. So on one hand, they always have to worry about the competition, right? And the reason that a company like McDonald's has to continue to advertise, I mean, you might think, doesn't everybody know about McDonald's by now, right? Do we really need more advertising on McDonald's? Well, in fact, they have to keep up the advertising machine because they've got Burger King, right, nipping at their heels. And so competition is really what it's all about when it comes to heavy-duty marketing. And then, of course, these are mostly all publicly traded companies, which means they have to answer to their shareholders. And I can't emphasize the importance of this enough, because a lot of people ask me, well, you know, why can't companies just do the right thing? It's like, well, because of this little thing called shareholders, and shareholders demand a return on their investment. And in fact, companies are required by law to pay attention to their shareholders first and foremost. So the CEO of Kraft may be a very nice guy, probably has a couple of kids that, you know, I'm not sure if he's feeding them Kraft products, but the point is it doesn't matter how nice the CEO is, how nice the board members are. They have to show return on the investment, and they have to show quarterly earnings for profit, and that is a huge factor in how companies behave. So what's happening? There are all these pressures that the food industry is now finding itself on, and that's represented by these arrows on top. And so, you know, we have this debate going on right now with the media asking a lot of questions, advocates like myself pointing fingers to various members of the food industry, policymakers like this local lawmaker trying to fix the problem, and then to some extent there are lawsuits being leveled against the food industry. Okay, so you think of the food industry as sort of, you know, having to deal with all of these pressures, all of these questions being asked. How is it that so many Americans are overweight and sick from poor diet? What is the role of the food industry in helping to cause this huge public health crisis? So the way I think about, you know, what the food industry is doing is that they have various sort of options, right, when it comes to how they can respond. And I'm going to give you examples of each of these, but just to kind of give you the big overview. So the first option they have is to do nothing. Right? And we actually do see some companies that are kind of in the background, a company like Carl's Jr. Have you seen them promote salads? No. Carl's Jr. is just sort of going along its merry way, promoting more and more, you know, more disgusting hamburger products and so forth. They don't really care about the fact that there's an obesity epidemic. They're not really subject to the same kind of scrutiny that a company like McDonald's is. So there are companies that are just kind of doing nothing. That's certainly one option. But more commonly, we're seeing these other categories. And the first is what I call denial and excuses. And so we have, you know, companies and also trade groups are really critical, which I'll talk more about. But there are companies and trade groups that are just saying, there really isn't a problem here. Those are mostly kind of outlying trade groups. But the more common response is to make excuses. So yes, we may have this little thing we call an obesity epidemic in America, but really the problem is personal responsibility, right? People just need to change the way they eat. And of course, the big excuse is exercise. Again, because there's so much emphasis on obesity and this really not scientifically sound notion that it's just calories in, calories out. So that's another huge response that we're seeing. And then under the category I call change products, we have so much going on in this realm of reformulating. So now we have all kinds of, you know, allegedly healthier cookies on the market, better for you, junk food, and so forth. So repackaging, endorsements, and again, I'm going to give you examples. And then what I call fighting back, which is really the more heavy-duty type of fighting back in the form of lobbying, attacking advocates like myself, and engaging in a number of different forms of co-optation and control. So that's kind of the big picture. And then I want to start with this excuse I like to call physical activity. So, and education, which they kind of tend to get combined. So the food industry has decided that the solution to this massive crisis is not, of course, changing anything about how they operate. Rather, it lies in health education, and particularly around exercise. And so now we have a number of curriculum that these companies are putting into our nation's schools. So this one is called Balance First, and it's put out there by PepsiCo. And if you don't know that much about PepsiCo, you can find out all you want on my blog, because this is a company that I have gotten somewhat obsessed with. People don't realize that PepsiCo makes way more than just soda. Okay, they own Frito-Lay, largest snack company in America. They also own other products like Gatorade and Tropicana orange juice and Quaker Oats. And so they like to kind of promote themselves as this balanced, having this balanced portfolio, and that they're really responsible. And so, but one of the ways that they do this is by, you know, essentially claiming to be educating our school children about how to eat right. And I don't know about you, but that's not who I want to be educating my kids. Similarly, Coca-Cola has a curriculum they call Live It. In this case, they partnered with and co-opted, or Lance Armstrong allowed himself to be co-opted for this educational material. And of course, you know, who better to be the paragon of health than someone like Lance Armstrong? And you know, you have to really look at this as an attempt to distract, okay? no question, Americans need to be exercising more. I always have to stop and acknowledge, yes, exercise is important, but you have to see the politics and the context for what's going on here. When a company like PepsiCo or Coca-Cola is promoting exercise, they're not doing it because they really want Americans to exercise more. They're doing it as a way to deflect attention and distract away from what's really at the core of the problem, which is how Americans are eating. And then McDonald's, of course, never wanted to miss a PR opportunity. Created this program they call Passport to Play, which went into elementary schools. And I don't know if you heard that Ronald McDonald himself went through a makeover, so he's no longer just wearing the clown suit, now he's become an active soccer player. And then back to PepsiCo, my favorite company to rant on, gave money to a poor neighborhood in the Washington, D.C. area a few years back to create a playground, right? And this is a great way to kind of co-opt communities that are desperate for these types of funds, and also schools, of course, always happy to have free materials. And but they couldn't just write the check. And I always say it's fine for a company that wants to give money through philanthropy to communities that need it, but just write the check and go away. Of course not. In this case, they branded the playground with this smart spot symbol, which is the little funny green symbol that you see there. And that's a way, obviously, to get their brand into parents' brain cells. So I'm going to say more about that in a bit. But so that's sort of under the co-optation of the education message and the physical activity, making excuses part of the response. So now I want to talk about changing products. And again, there are so many examples of this that it's hard to even really talk about what's going on. But one of the ways that this is manifesting itself is what I call these self-nutrition seals. Okay, so I mentioned the smart spot symbol, which comes from PepsiCo, smart choices made easy, and then Kraft has one they call a sensible solution. All right, and these look like they could even be government seal programs, right? Of course, they're green, because everyone knows green means healthy. And the check mark is a very universal symbol for positive icon. And I think if you asked a lot of people who saw this, they might actually think this means it's, given the seal of approval by perhaps a federal government body or some third-party independent, reviewer. Not the case at all. These are basically the companies themselves deciding which of their crappy products get this type of seal of approval. Okay, and so they put out the nutrition criteria, and they make it sound like, oh yes, it's all based on federal government la-di-da, which of course doesn't make it exactly all that impressive. But the point is, they get to decide. So what are some examples of how these symbols get used? In the case of PepsiCo, we have the Smart Spot healthy products of baked Cheetos, and then of course their diet soft drinks all get the good for you. And the other thing about PepsiCo, which I always find amusing, is they've actually created these certain ways of describing their different products in their portfolio. And so they say they have good-for-you foods. I mean, this is all PepsiCo speak, and it's I don't know, I just find it amusing. So they say their good-for-you products are like the Quaker Oats, the orange juice, and of course, water, right? So if you don't know this, you should. PepsiCo owns Aquafina bottled water. Coca-Cola owns Dasani bottled water. And of course, always put out as like the healthy product, the worst possible thing for the environment. But never mind that. So this is the good for you category of PepsiCo products. Then they talk about having better for you, okay? Because it's all like, in their lingo and their comparison. So better for you products are like this. So the diet soft drinks and the baked Cheetos. And then the real junk food they call fun for you, right? Because they're not going to say bad for you, right? Because that would be the logical conclusion, right? From good for you to bad for you. No. The real junky stuff is just fun. And of course, well, wouldn't that be the category line that everyone would gravitate towards? Okay, so next rant is on this Kraft. So Kraft owns Lunchables. And, if you had to pick, like, probably the most abysmal product line aimed at kids, this is right up there. And so this is one of the products that gets, the Kraft seal of approval, called the Sensible Solution. And because it's an excellent source of calcium, never mind that, this is one of my favorites because it's pepperoni-flavored sausage, which, I grew up in New York City where we had the world's best pizza, but I never heard of anything called pepperoni-flavored sausage. I don't know what that means. I don't think that exists in, in the real world. It only exists sort of in the imaginary processed food world of Kraft. Okay, so I coined this term nutri-washing in my book, and this has been my poster child for years. And when the 2005 version of the National Dietary Guidelines for Americans came out, they discovered that Americans weren't eating enough whole grain. So the food industry, never to miss a beat, decided they're going to co-opt this whole grain recommendation. And no product is junky enough to not get the whole grain seal of approval. And so Reese's Puffs just kind of they have, it's amazing to me. They're just really pretty gutsy. And they get away with it, so why not? And then I just bought a newer version of Reese's Puffs, which, it's even gotten worse. now they're saying first ingredient is whole grain. They're just making more and more of these crazy claims. And I could go on and on about whole grains. And, often because there's so much other junk in the way, they have to actually bump up the fiber with some chemical forms of fiber or other isolated fibers. So, the whole grain deception is quite stunning. And then my other favorite poster child for crazy health claims. So you can actually protect your children from the flu, apparently, by feeding them Cocoa Krispies. And this one went so far over the line that even the federal government said, we don't think so. And it got a lot of media attention, and Kellogg actually said, okay, well, we won't make that crazy claim anymore. So one down, 20,000 to go. So, and again, many, many examples of this type of thing. And I was glad this morning Joe brought up the Crave product, and that's also on my hit list now. And it actually does have a health claim also for whole grains. It has this little green seal of approval in the top of the box. So I'm going after that one next. So I want to now just take a minute to describe for you who the real big, powerful lobbying groups are. Because, I think, well, obviously people have heard of these, the big branded companies, although most people don't realize, you walk down the supermarket aisle, probably every other food is owned by either PepsiCo or Kraft, or General Mills. The consolidation industry is huge. And by the way, even companies or brands that you think, like Adwala, I always love giving examples because I like to see the mouths drop. Okay, Adwala. Who owns Adwala? Anybody? Coca-Cola. Thank you. Of course, this room's too smart. Kashi cereal. Kellogg. Yeah. I can't think of any others. But the point is, even the smaller, better companies are being bought out left and right by the huge conglomerates. So it's important to understand how the food industry kind of breaks down in terms of lobbying groups. So on one hand, we have the packaged food side. So the products that you see in the supermarket. And this is a huge. Both sectors, the packaged food side and the restaurant side, are both huge. The food industry is incredibly large and complex and extremely lucrative. So packaged food industry, these companies that I've been talking about, represented by this huge trade group called the Grocery Manufacturers of America, and you may not have heard of them. However, they are doing all of the heavy-duty lobbying, particularly at the national level, but also at the state level. And then on the restaurant side, the big fast food companies and all the chains are represented by the National Restaurant Association, as I like to call it, the other NRA. And they are also hugely influential and powerful. And interestingly, the restaurant industry also operates through various state-level trade groups. So like California, we're always battling the California Restaurant Association. And there's probably a Washington state. I know there is a Washington Restaurant Association because they just were engaged in some alcohol lobbying that I also happen to work on. Try to take on two industries at once. It's pretty tricky. But so the trade groups, the way they operate, of course, is to pool the money from the various companies to have them do their bidding. And this is important because the individual companies are very concerned about their PR image, right? So they don't really like having to take too big a, to go out on a limb when it comes to controversial issues. They're very happy, however, to pony up the thousands of dollars a year in membership to these groups. So these trade groups are the ones that then do the dirty work of lobbying hard to stop any, real good policies from going through. So these trade groups come up time and time again, but they tend to, not get enough attention because they're kind of working behind the scenes. So that's, if you think of the industry as like, the branded companies represented by trade groups, which are honest, at least, that they do lobbying. I mean, that's what they're about. They also do a lot of public relations work. But then the next level down from that is a lot more nefarious, okay? And these are called front groups. I didn't make this up. This is a term of industry kind of lobbying and PR in general. Front groups are groups that sound like one thing, and my poster child for this example, for this type of organization, is the Center for Consumer Freedom, right? Sounds good. They're for consumers and freedom, and it's the all-American way, and they've got the American flag in there, and who could be against any of that, right? But in fact, they are fully funded, not just by the food industry, as it turns out. They were started with a grant from Philip Morris, might have heard of them, and they also represent the alcohol industry. So sort of the trifecta of chronic disease and harm in this country, tobacco, alcohol, and food, funding the Center for Consumer Freedom. And their chief lobbyist is Rick Berman, about the slimiest guy you probably never heard of. And a couple years ago, 60 Minutes did a great expose about Rick Berman. And actually this website, bermanexposed.org, is put up by one of the nonprofit groups. I can't remember if it's PETA, one of them, that he's constantly attacking. And so they do the dirty work, okay? And I can't emphasize enough how dirty this organization is. They've attacked me, they've attacked Mary Nestle. I mean, you name the sort of expert in the field, and they are the attack dogs for the industry. Again, because McDonald's isn't going to put out a hit piece on Mary Nestle, right? But these guys will. And so they operate, behind the scenes, but also out in front. So they will get, for example, op-eds published, in major newspapers, saying things like, oh, there's really no obesity epidemic. These guys are big into denial, but they'll also come out on specific issues, right? And so obviously they've got enough money to do the kind of on-the-ground media work that it takes to get into major newspapers and so forth, and they can be very influential. And too often, the newspapers, to their media outlets, to their chagrin, do not release information, do not tell their readers or their listeners who is funding this group. So that's how they look legitimate. And then so Center for Consumer Freedom is what I call like a generic front group. And then increasingly there are these sort of issue-specific front groups that are springing up like crazy. And I can hardly even keep up with them because there are so many of them. It seems like every week there's a new one. And so they operate the same way to do the public relations on behalf of the industry that's funded them. And so I have these two examples here. One, Americans Against Food Taxes. Sounds so great. Of course, Americans Against Food Taxes. That's, who's not going to support that? Well, if you look at who's signed on, I mean, they're basically a who's who of the food industry. And soda taxes, fat taxes, whatever, are kind of a popular issue now, being promoted by some of my public health colleagues, and the food industry doesn't want to go there. So they're, heavily funding these types of opposition groups. And then, if you followed the hilarious ad campaign, PR campaign from the Corn Refiners Association, because you might have heard we have a little bit of controversy around high fructose corn syrup, and so they have just gone gangbusters trying to convince Americans, oh, nothing to see here, really, it's all the same, sugar is sugar. I mean, there's even a lawsuit now between the Corn Association and the Sugar Association. I mean, these guys are just kind of duking it out, and it'll be fun to kind of see where that goes. But whenever you see a group that sounds too good to be true, if they have the word council attached to them, I mean, odds are it's not like a government body. I mean, this is their trickery, is to use terms that sound official. So there's the American Council on Science and Health, long-time industry front group. One of my favorites goes by IFIC, which is the International Food and Information Council. Again, doesn't that sound like a government body, like that's part of the World Health Organization or something? Not true. And then there's this other kind of lesser category, but still can be quite influential, which are think tanks and sort of broad-based groups that work on a number of issues, but then tend to, will take on, in this case, several specific issues related to food. So the Cato Institute, of course, notorious libertarian group, put out some information about soda taxes. And then the Washington Legal Foundation, again, been around for years, did this silly little graphic poking fun at the MyPlate. May not be able to see it, but they took the components of the MyPlate and replaced it with government regulations, class action litigation, ha ha ha. Okay, and then ALEC, another hugely influential group that you never heard of. It stands for the American Legislative Exchange Council, and they have board members from Coke and Kraft. And then this website I put up there, alecexposed.org, is a wonderful resource created by this group called the Center for Media and Democracy based in Wisconsin. But ALEC operates very heavily at the state level. So what they do is create sort of cookie cutter bills. And because, it's important to understand industry doesn't just lobby against the good types of bills that we want. They're also, always proactive in getting bills out there that are good for them. And so ALEC helps the industry go state by state. So they create a cookie cutter model of a bill, but they do it in all these back channel ways, and then also ways that form relations. Lobbying is a lot about relationships, right? And so they're very good at getting cozy with lawmakers. Okay, so I want to talk about co-optation, professional co-optation. And I think this group will especially appreciate. I attended the American Dietetic Association, which, by the way, if you don't know, ADA has changed its name. So now they are called the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, right? Because now they're apparently a scientific body. But so the ADA, it was still the ADA conference I attended last September. I'd heard about this for years, that the ADA, of course, has been co-opted by the food industry, but I wanted to see it for myself. And this is just one example. I'll show you some others, but I just want to paint this picture of, and it's funny coming here. I have to say I'm very impressed with how unco-opted your exhibitor booths are. They're very kind of quaint and, staid, and it's like, oh, what's this about? Yeah. And it's just such, if I could do a side-by-side comparison, it would make for some great graphics, because in contrast, you walk into the ADA conference, the expo, of course, huge expo hall, and I kind of thought maybe I was in the wrong place, right? Because it really looked like it was a gathering of one of these trade groups that I was talking about, or perhaps, the National Confectioners Association. It's truly mind-boggling how, and then Big Pharma, of course, also hugely represented. And then you go kind of way up to the side, and there's this natural, the natural aisle, which of course that has some co-optation too, if you legitimate organic food companies there and so forth. But the main event is really all about these major companies. So McDonald's had a booth, was actually relatively small. I was told in the past they were much bigger, but they did have, again, the MyPlate, the real MyPlate symbol, and trying to show dietitians how they could educate their clients about how you could eat at McDonald's within the MyPlate guidelines. And so Coca-Cola probably had one of the biggest booths, because there were 4 main sponsors, right? So it was named sponsors of the what do they call it? The FNCE, Food Nutrition something co-opted expo. So Coca-Cola, not PepsiCo, I'm not going to remember them all, National Dairy Council, Aramark, and I can't remember the 4th one. So the point is, Coca-Cola had one of the biggest booths because they were one of the big name sponsors. So this particular wall I liked, it was promoting the registered dietitian. What is she holding? An apple, right? Which is, why isn't she holding a can of Coke? And then they had, of course, the Cokes, the bag that you could get for the Coke swag. And also the Hershey's, that was the 4th named sponsor. Hershey's, which was particularly fun because, of course, talking about how chocolate is good for you. And I don't know if you know that they formed some stupid educational program with ADA that they call Moderation Nation, right? Because who better to educate America about eating in moderation than the nation's biggest chocolate company? So they were all over it. And then PepsiCo, again, they had its own, booth, and then they had a whole separate booth just for Frito-Lay, and promoting their natural. So I don't know if you know this, but Frito-Lay has made this announcement. The companies are very big on announcements, and they've said that half their products, and I'm not sure exactly how that works out, and they couldn't really explain it to me, but half their products are going to be natural. And of course, a natural, according to what? FYI, there is no official definition of natural according to the federal government. So of course, Frito-Lay has come up with its own, which is just so lame, like no preservatives and maybe 1 or 2 other things. But the key here is, of course, Frito-Lay products are mostly made with what? Corn, which is what? genetically engineered, right? And so there's been a couple of lawsuits now related to this, and this is something I also I work on. I've been advising law firms on how to sue the food industry, and now there's interest in going after companies that are using the natural label in general, but particularly with GMO products, and Frito-Lay is definitely #1 in this regard. So yes, so we'll see what happens with that. So the natural thing is definitely one of my biggest pet peeves. Okay, so I want to spend a minute now, and then I'll leave you with some good news, and then we'll get to questions. But you know, the Let's Move thing always comes up, and somebody made mention earlier of Michelle Obama. And so I've written a bit about this, and it's been 2 years since the First Lady launched the Let's Move initiative. And you know, lots of good things to say. She's definitely a wonderful spokesperson, has brought important attention to the issue of childhood obesity, but in particular, I've been pleased to see her not just talk about this issue in terms of personal responsibility or even just exercise, but to bring attention to the real social justice problem of food deserts, neighborhoods that don't have access to fresh food, school food being, of course, abysmal. And there has been a lot of positive outcome of that. However, unfortunately, she's in the wrong wing of the White House, right? So the real action takes place in her husband's wing of the White House, and there's just, there's been no moving, really, when it comes to public policy. And in fact, there's been a lot of backtracking of movement, I'm sorry to say, under the Obama administration. I mean, of course, we've had a lot of hope. We had a lot of hope and change and all that, but there hasn't been a lot of reality. And I want to just say, before I move to that point, that recently the First Lady announced that Let's Move was going to kind of shift its emphasis a bit to exercise. And wow, I mean, I jumped on this because the science really doesn't support promoting exercise related to childhood obesity. And of course, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, extremely important political hot button, right, to be reframing, to be kind of distracting away from the food industry. She did early on give a talk to the Grocery Manufacturers Association, but since then there's really been nothing out of Let's Move aimed at the food industry, except for various forms of co-optation. So I'm sorry I can't have too much more positive to say about Let's Move. And then so my most sort of salient example of how we're not getting anywhere when it comes to the White House and the federal government on food policy is related to food marketing to children. So, I could give a whole talk just on this issue, but food marketing to children has, been kind of a rallying cry of advocates for a number of years, and, the federal government has sort of, said, well, we can't fix it from a regulatory standpoint. They've sort of taken the food industry line that there's a First Amendment problem, and I can explain more about that. But what I want to describe here is this particular policy initiative that was attempted by the federal government. I don't know if I should call it a policy initiative. It was an attempt to basically improve the food industry's self-regulatory approach to food marketing to children. So to back up a step, for years the food industry has said, we don't need any regulations regarding food marketing to children because we've got it covered with our own voluntary measures, right? And so there have been like a number of iterations of food industry self-regulatory guidelines, sometimes on their own, most of them on their own, like Coca-Cola, for example, for years has said, oh, we don't market to children under age 12. Okay, well, never mind all the little toys that have Coca-Cola on it, never mind American Idol, which is, for some reason, the most viewed show for children ages 2 to 11. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we can catch Coke in that lie. Okay, and then we have this more generic sort of food industry-wide set of voluntary regulations that most of the big companies have signed on to. Okay, unfortunately, you might not be surprised to find out this system is not working. Okay, the food industry either doesn't adhere to these guidelines or the guidelines themselves are just so weak that they don't matter. Okay, so they're very self-serving, and this is the problem with this whole area of self-regulation, something I've written a lot about. We cannot trust the food industry to regulate itself. I know it's not a big surprise to people in this room, but it is a critical component to the policy discussions that are going on in Washington, D.C. So, to fix this problem, because the federal government has acknowledged that the industry's current scheme of self-regulation, again, with its own guidelines for how they're going to market to children, has been a dismal failure because it's been shown to be so. So, they formed what's called the which government agency. Interagency Working Group, IWG, was formed a couple of years back with these 4, heavy hitter government agencies, right? Led by the Federal Trade Commission, also joined by the Centers for Disease Control, Food and Drug Administration, and the USDA. This was a big deal, and it was mandated by Congress, so, my colleagues at Center for Science and the Public Interest and a number of other groups pushed Congress to get this bill passed that would require this interagency working group to basically improve upon industry's voluntary regulations. Now, understand what that means. They weren't going to set actual law. They weren't going to pass regulation. There was nothing legally binding about this effort. They simply wanted to help the food industry with better regulatory guidelines by taking a look at what the science says, what would be nutritionally acceptable types of foods to market to children, which I don't even agree with that premise, because for me, all marketing to children is basically unethical and should be stopped. But point is, this was the government's, line of trying to address this issue. Okay. So, and this is being dragged out for at least 2 years now, and every meeting I'd go to with particularly Mary Engel from the FTC, she'd have to give excuses about why it was being stalled, and of course we knew the food industry was behind the scenes keeping this whole thing from happening. Okay, so they come out with a set of proposed guidelines. The industry goes ballistic, right? They have done the most vociferous campaigning against this, again, attempt to just improve the voluntary guidelines. These are not meant to be in any way legally binding. And yet, even with this, pretty minimal attempt, the food industry went crazy. So they created this front group called the Sensible Food Policy Coalition, made up of big food lobbyists, and their mantra was keep the government out of your kitchen. Just totally ridiculous stuff. They even claimed that these voluntary rules would violate the First Amendment under free speech. Again, completely ridiculous because they're voluntary, right? You cannot possibly violate the First Amendment if the government isn't requiring, the government can't be violating the First Amendment if they're not requiring anything to happen. And yet, so where things stand now, the last shot across the bow by the food industry on this was to get Congress to require a cost-benefit analysis before the final rules, the final guidelines can come out. Because we still haven't seen the final guidelines, and now they're being held up by this ridiculous requirement. And you might wonder, how can you do a cost-benefit analysis on something that would be voluntary? Well, guess what? You can't. Okay, and so this is the name of the game, just to stop this thing cold. And the last word we heard from the Federal Trade Commission was, yeah, they're probably not going to go through with it, basically. So, and this is 2 or 3 years, and again, I wasn't a big fan of it, but I know a number of colleagues that really worked hard to try to, this was the least we could do, and yet it's all being stalled. So that's, sort of the bottom line for me as far as let's move, or what have we seen from the Obama administration to try to improve on this issue, and unfortunately, it's just the political will is not there. So this is the result. So instead of improvements, we're left with this type of thing going on, with there's really no food in this box. And of course, the point isn't to sell food. The point is to just get the child's attention with the SpongeBob image and have the child nag the parent incessantly. Okay, but now that you're completely depressed, I want to just highlight a few things that I think are some positive signs. And I don't just do this in jest. I do think that there are some positive things to think about in terms of what's going on sort of politically and in food policy discussions. So the first is, we have in the last 10 years, and actually I just saw that Fast Food Nation, one of the books that certainly inspired me and many others, is now in its 10th anniversary, which is sort of, I don't know, good and bad, because not much has changed, unfortunately, in the 10 years. But the good thing is, that book has really helped spark a movement, right? And so there was tremendous attention being paid. I started working on this issue way back in the late 90s, and, it's the night and day as far as, reporters calling me now. So I just think we should acknowledge that there's just so much more discussion and attention being paid to these important issues, and that's a really good thing. If you're not familiar with the New York Times columnist Mark Bittman, you should be following him every week. He's, a longtime cookbook author and had a column for a number of years called The Minimalist, and is now turned kind of food policy pundit. And we are so lucky to have someone like him on our side. And so that's just a really good positive sign with the New York Times. And then I feel like there's been certainly a lot of good progress in the area of animal welfare. Lots of great groups out there pushing the envelope and getting people aware. And I think more people are saying no to sort of traditionally factory farmed animal products. And then some new players on the scene. So I kind of have a good idea of who's doing what in the nonprofit world. And I just started working with the Center for Food Safety, which has for many years actually been on the attack with Monsanto and genetically engineered food, but they've hired me to kind of expand their agenda into other food safety areas, but also nutrition. And then the Environmental Working Group, also large group based in DC, has started to get into this arena as well. And they actually put out, of interest apropos to the topic of the conference, a great report, I think it was in December, on sugary cereals. So, I mean, not any surprise, again, to people in this room, that most kids' cereals are packed with sugar, but they actually did a great analysis, and you can find it on their website, and they really exposed how much sugar is in this stuff, and then also compared to the various food marketing guidelines that industry says they're adhering to. So it's just good to have more of these types of players on the scene and drawing attention, because they're very good at getting media. And then Just Label It is a nationwide effort to get genetically engineered foods labeled. I think maybe something like half the states, I think, by now, or maybe 20 states, have proposed bills to require labeling of genetically engineered food. There's a ballot initiative process going on right now in California. There's the national effort at Just Label It is to ask FDA to require labeling. Good luck with that. But the point is, this is an issue that just is really, I think, picking up steam, and that hopefully something will come of that. And then, as you know, the local food movement is just burgeoning. I was very excited because there's actually a farmer's market going on today. One of you told me, and I raced right out a bit ago to catch it. And, it always just kind of warms my heart when I travel and I get to take advantage of finding some local food. I discovered opal apples. I don't know, I never heard of opal apples. Yeah, oh, okay, good. Anyway, so, I can't emphasize enough how huge. There are so many great efforts going on at the local level to, increase access to farmers markets or CSAs or, all these sort of alternative food models that are out there. And I think a lot of that's picking up steam, but, I also kind of have to give a reality check, even though it's supposed to be good news. The bad news is it's still a drop in the bucket, all right? And so we still need policy change to make these kind of efforts available to everyone. So, I have a number of kind of ways to fight back. And, a lot of it's kind of common sense. So things like do your homework. Opposition research, if you're an advocacy group, I think is vitally important, and one that's often not paid much attention to. And then calling out these industry-backed groups. I mean, any way that you can do that in your work, if you see, the ADA is doing something you don't like, and you can point out the fact that they're funded, or at least get a lot of their funding from big food. And then having mostly these talking points, or rather these recommendations, are for groups that are on the ground doing lobbying, but it's something to keep in mind too for your own work. Mostly what I want to say is what I said at the beginning, right, which is that it's not enough to just educate people one by one, and it's certainly not enough to just make changes in your own diet. That this movement, if it's going to get anywhere, has to get more political. And while, again, there's good signs in that direction, it's nowhere near where we need to be to really take on the likes of the food industry. So with that call to action, I think I will now shift to taking questions and see what you all want to talk about. So thank you.